In the forgotten backroads of rural America, an extraordinary tale of fate is about to unfold. When Michael Hayes, a homeless veteran with nothing but his toolbox and unwavering spirit, discovers an abandoned farm slowly decaying into ruin, he sees more than just broken fences and withered fields. He sees a chance at redemption. What he doesn't know is that this neglected piece of land belongs to Catherine Wells, a reclusive billionaire whose vast fortune has become her prison. For 6 months, Michael pours his heart into every repair, unaware that his selfless acts are being watched. This isn't just a story about a man fixing a farm. This is about how a broken soul with empty pockets would teach one of the wealthiest women in America what true riches really mean. When their worlds finally collide, both will discover that sometimes the greatest fortune lies in the courage to begin again. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dawn painted the abandoned farmhouse in shades of amber and shadow as Michael Hayes shouldered his weathered toolbox up the overgrown path. The wooden handle, smooth from years of use, pressed familiar grooves into his calloused palm. He paused at the broken front gate, studying the rusted hinges with the practiced eye of a man who'd spent his life fixing things before everything in his own life had broken. The toolbox had been his father's, solid oak with brass corners, now dented and scratched from decades of use. Inside, each tool told its own story. A hammer with a replaced handle, worn smooth from 3 generations of hands. Screwdrivers carried through his tours in Afghanistan. Wrenches and pliers salvaged from dumpsters behind hardware stores. These weren't just tools. They were the last fragments of who he used to be, a contractor, a veteran, a man with a home and a purpose. The farmhouse loomed before him, its weathered clapboards peeling like old scabs, windows clouded with decades of neglect. But beneath the decay, Michael saw good bones, solid foundation, strong beams. Like him, this place was down but not out. His trained eye caught the details others might miss. The Victorian-era craftsmanship in the porch railings, hand-carved corbels under the eaves. This place had been built with pride, with purpose. Something about that resonated deep in his chest, stirring memories of better days. The nearest fence post hung at a drunken angle, its wire fencing coiled. On the ground like abandoned snakeskin, simple enough fix. He'd seen the same thing 100 times in compounds overseas. Structure compromised, needing just a little care to stand tall again. Well, he murmured to himself, might as well make myself useful. The first swing of the hammer rang out, across the empty fields like a church bell, familiar and right. Each strike drove the post deeper, more secure. By midday, he'd restored 20 feet of fencing to attention, standing straight and true against the summer sky. He worked methodically, the way the army had taught him: assess, plan, execute. The routine felt good, felt right. Something about working with his hands always cleared his mind, pushed back the shadows that had haunted him since his discharge. The sun climbed higher, baking the back of his neck. He'd learned to ignore discomfort, to push through it. Same way he'd pushed through those first nights sleeping rough, when shame burned hotter than any physical pain. When the memories of his old life, the construction company he'd built, the home he'd lost after the accident, and the medical bills threatened to drown him. But here, with tools in his hands and honest work before him, those memories felt more distant. The rhythm of repair, the satisfaction of seeing something broken made whole again, it soothed something raw inside him. As afternoon stretched toward evening, Michael stepped back to survey his work. The fence line now stood proper and clean, a straight edge against the wild growth beyond. Not bad for a day's labor. He gathered his tools, each one returned to its proper place in the box. Old habits died hard. His stomach growled, reminding him of the long walk back to the shelter in town. But for the first time in months, the gnawing emptiness felt different, purposeful almost, like hunger earned from good work rather than mere deprivation. He took one last look at the farmhouse as the setting sun gilt its windows. Tomorrow, he decided, he'd come back tomorrow. Start on those loose boards on the porch. Maybe check the roof for leaks. This place deserved better than slow decay. And maybe, just maybe in fixing it, he could start fixing himself too. Michael didn't know about the security cameras discreetly, mounted in the trees, their lenses tracking his departure. Didn't see the black Mercedes pulled off on a distant service road, or the woman inside watching him through binoculars with an expression of growing curiosity. Catherine Wells lowered the binoculars, fingers drumming thoughtfully on the leather steering wheel. She should call the police. That's what her board of directors would advise, what her security team would insist upon. Instead, she found herself reaching for her phone, pulling up the property's security feed. There was something in the deliberate way the man worked that spoke of respect rather than destruction, of healing rather than harm. In her penthouse office 50 stories above Manhattan, Catherine Wells sat bathed in the blue glow of multiple monitors. Each screen showed a different angle of the farm, security footage streaming live from cameras installed after her father's death. Until now, they'd captured nothing but wind-blown leaves and the occasional deer. Today's footage was different. She watched the mysterious handyman work, his movements precise and purposeful. Her security team had already run facial recognition. Michael Hayes, 45, former Marine Corps combat engineer, honorable discharge, owner of Hayes Construction until 3 years ago. No criminal record, just another casualty of America's broken healthcare system. Ms. Wells, her assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. The board is waiting. Tell them I'll be 5 minutes. Her eyes stayed fixed on the screens. In one window, Michael was carefully replacing rotted boards on the porch steps. In another, she could see his previous day's work, the fence line now standing straight and true. The farm had been her father's pride once, before wealth and ambition drew him to the city. She'd spent summers there as a child, back when the fields bloomed with corn and the barn housed more than dust and memories. Now it was just another asset in her vast portfolio, marked for eventual development like everything else her father had left her. The intercom buzzed again. Ms. Wells. I know, Marcus, I know. But she didn't move. Something about the way this stranger treated her property stirred old memories. The care in his movements reminded her of her father in the early days, before spreadsheets replaced soil under his fingernails. She opened another window on her computer, pulling up the development proposals. Luxury condos, a golf course, maximizing, return on underutilized assets, as her board put it. Her father would have approved. He'd taught her that sentiment was the enemy of success. But watching Michael work, she felt an unfamiliar resistance to that familiar logic. His presence had awakened something in the old place, given it a pulse. Again, her finger hovered over the number for local law enforcement. One call would end this cleanly. Instead, she found herself opening a browser, searching for local hardware stores. Marcus, she called through the intercom, cancel my afternoon, and I need you to arrange delivery of some supplies to the Morton address, building materials, tools. Have them left inside the front gate, the farm. But I thought, just do it, please, discreetly. She turned back to the monitors, watching Michael measure twice before making a cut. And Marcus, make sure everything's quality, professional grade. Yes, Ms. Wells, the board will wait. Some things are more important than quarterly projections. She sat back, surprised by her own words. When was the last time she'd said no to the board, to her father's ghost, to the relentless march of progress that turned everything it touched into steel and glass? The security footage played on, silent but compelling. Michael worked with the patience of a man rebuilding more than just a farm. Catherine recognized that look. She saw it in her mirror some mornings, the face of someone searching for something money couldn't buy. She pulled up her calendar, clearing the next week. The board could handle things without her. Right now she had a mystery to solve, a stranger to watch, and maybe, though she wasn't ready to admit it yet, a piece of her past to reclaim. In one of the screens, Michael paused his work, looking up at the setting sun. For a moment, it seemed like he was staring directly into the camera, directly at her. Catherine felt seen for the first time in years, even though she knew it was impossible. He had no idea she was watching, no idea that his simple act of restoration was slowly beginning to restore something in her too. The barn door protested with decades of rust as Michael worked it open. Dust motes danced in the shaft of morning light that pierced the gloom, illuminating old farm equipment and forgotten memories. In the corner, a stack of mouldering boxes caught his eye, papers spilling from their torn sides like surrendered secrets. He knelt beside them, careful of the rotting cardboard. Inside the first box, beneath layers of cobwebs, he found an old leather-bound ledger. Its pages were yellow with age, but still intact, the careful handwriting inside speaking of pride and purpose. June 15th, 1962, he read aloud, voice echoing in the empty barn. First harvest complete. Sarah says the corn's the finest she's seen. Maybe this dream wasn't so foolish after all. Thomas Wells. Thomas Wells. The name stirred something in Michael's memory. Hadn't there been a Wells agricultural company around here years ago, before the big corporations took over? He turned more pages, following the story written in ink and numbers. Good years and bad, births and deaths, dreams recorded in careful columns. The last entry was dated 1985. Time to chase bigger dreams. Sarah says I'm a fool to leave the land, but there's no future in farming anymore, selling the equipment tomorrow. Michael closed the ledger gently. He understood about dreams that slipped away, about the cruel math that could turn a life's work into just another failed business. Outside, morning sun caught something new by the gate. Stacks of lumber, fresh tools, everything he needed to repair the porch properly. No note, no explanation, just help appearing like grace. He ran his hand along the lumber. Premium grade, the kind he used to order for his best clients. Someone was watching. Someone cared what happened to this place. The thought should have made him uneasy, but instead it filled him with a strange warmth. He wasn't alone in wanting to save this small piece of history. Across town, Catherine sat in her parked Mercedes, watching the farm through binoculars. She saw Michael discover the supplies, saw him test the wood's quality with a contractor's knowing touch, saw him smile, the first smile she'd witnessed in days of watching. Her phone buzzed, another message from the board about the development proposals. She dismissed it without reading. Let them wait. Some things were worth more than money, even if she couldn't explain why. Michael worked through the morning, the new tools singing in his hands. Every cut was precise, every nail driven true. He'd forgotten how good it felt to work with proper equipment, to do things right instead of just making do. By afternoon, the porch was transformed. New boards replaced rot, fresh paint covered decay. He stepped back to admire his work. And that's when he noticed the book in the windows, a brand new copy of Advanced Carpentry Techniques, placed where he couldn't miss it. Inside its cover, he found a single sentence written in elegant script. "Thank you for caring about this place." The words hit him like a physical thing. How long had it been since anyone had thanked him for anything? Since he'd felt like more than just another invisible man on the streets? He pulled a worn notepad from his toolbox and wrote carefully, "Thank you for the supplies. I'll do right by this farm." He left the note where the book had been, a small act of faith in this strange, growing connection. Later, as Catherine retrieved the note, she found herself touching the careful handwriting, feeling the intention behind each word. For the first time since inheriting her father's empire, she felt something real beginning to take root in the frozen soil of her life. She looked up at the farm silhouetted against the evening sky. Her father had left this place to chase millions, then billions, But watching Michael work, seeing the care he put into every repair, she wondered if perhaps the real treasure had been here all along, waiting for someone to remember its worth. Summer heat shimmered above the newly repaired tin roof as Michael reached into his pocket, pulling out the latest note he'd found that morning. The paper was expensive, the kind he remembered from wedding invitations and business contracts in his former life. The handwriting remained as elegant as ever. The garden once grew the sweetest tomatoes in the county. The seeds in the shed are heritage varieties. He smiled, tucking the note away carefully. Over the past 2 weeks, these messages had become a kind of compass guiding his restoration efforts. Each one revealed another piece of the farm's history, another task waiting to be done. More than that, they'd become proof that someone else saw value in his work, in him. In her temporary office set up in a nearby bed and breakfast, Catherine adjusted her laptop screen, watching Michael through the security feed as he headed toward the old shed. She'd spent hours researching those heritage tomato seeds, making sure they were authentic to the farm's history. Her father's old records had proved invaluable, every detail of the farm's glory days meticulously documented. A new email notification popped up. Urgent development proposal review required. She minimized it without reading. The Catherine from a month ago wouldn't have recognized this version of herself, ignoring board meetings to watch a stranger garden. But was he really a stranger anymore? Through his notes, she'd come to know him better than many of the people she spent her days with. His messages were always careful, thoughtful, revealing a mind that saw beneath surfaces to the potential within. Found more rot in the east wall, one had read. Don't worry, the structure's still sound. Like people, sometimes places just need someone to believe in them. That note now sat in her desk drawer, folded and unfolded so many times the creases were soft as cloth. She'd never written back directly to his deeper messages, maintaining the fiction that this was just about the farm. But each time she read them, the walls she'd built around her heart developed new cracks. Michael spent the afternoon preparing the garden bed, his hands remembering skills learned from his grandmother long ago. As he worked, he thought about his mysterious benefactor, someone who knew the farm's history intimately, someone who cared enough to preserve it, someone who saw something in him worth trusting. He left his next note pinned carefully to the garden gate. Thank you for trusting me with this place's stories. Some days these notes are the only thing that feels real anymore. When Catherine found it that evening, she sat in her car for a long time, the paper trembling slightly in her hands. The board wanted her back in New York. The developers were getting impatient. Her carefully ordered world was waiting for her to return to it. Instead, she pulled out her notepad, writing by the dim car light. The stories were just words until you started making them live again. She hesitated, then added, "Who hurt you so badly that you stopped believing in yourself?" The question felt too personal, too real. She tucked the note into her pocket instead of leaving it. Tomorrow, she would leave something safer, another piece of the farm's history to guide his work. But for now, she allowed herself to feel the weight of what was happening here. Two broken people, separated by circumstance, but united by a place that needed them both, each working in their own way to restore something that the world had written off as worthless, each finding healing in the process, though neither could admit it yet. In the growing dark, fireflies began to rise from the newly tilled garden soil, their lights winking like signals between earth and sky. Catherine watched them through her windshield, remembering summer evenings here as a child, back when she still believed in magic. Maybe, she thought, some kinds of magic didn't need believing in. Maybe they simply grew, like hope from broken ground when you weren't looking. The bell above Morton's hardware store chimed as Michael pushed through the door, the familiar scent of sawdust and metal shavings greeting him. Ted Morton looked up from his inventory sheets, his weathered face creasing into a smile. "Back again? Must be a big project you're working on." Michael nodded, suddenly self-conscious in his worn clothes. He'd been avoiding conversation, paying with cash from odd jobs around town. But today, Ted stepped out from behind the counter, coffee cup in hand. "You know, folks have been talking about what's happening up at the old Wells place my dad used to supply them, back when it was still a working farm." "Really?" Michael paused, weighing his words. "Would your dad happen to remember what kind of paint they used on the original trim?" Ted's eyes lit up. "Better than that. Got some old invoices in the back. Might even have the exact color code." The local paper lay open on the counter. Mystery. Handyman breathes new life into historic farm. Beneath the headline was a grainy photo of the restored front porch, the new garden visible in the background. "Rachel Chen wrote that," Ted said, nodding at the paper. "She runs the Historical Society now. Been trying to preserve what's left of the old farms before the developers snap everything up." Michael picked up the paper, scanning the article. The writer described his work with surprising detail, noting the historical accuracy of his restoration choices. There was even a quote from a local contractor praising the craftsmanship. "Folks appreciate what you're doing up there," Ted continued, returning with a dusty folder. "That place meant something to this town before the big money moved in." As Ted spread the old invoices across the counter, the bell chimed again. Sarah Miller, who ran the diner down the street, hurried in with a paper bag. "Thought I might. And catch you here," she said to Michael. "Been meaning to bring you some real food. Can't do good work on empty stomach." The bag's warmth matched the warmth in her eyes. Michael found himself fighting back unexpected tears. When was the last time someone had thought about his hunger? Across town, Catherine sat in her temporary office, reading the same newspaper article. Rachel Chen's words painted a picture of more than just physical restoration. She wrote about community heritage, about the importance of remembering where they came from. Her phone buzzed, another text from the board, but below it was a notification from the Historical Society's website. Someone had posted old photos of the farm in its heyday, including one of her father as a young man, standing proud beside his first harvest. She clicked through the comments. "My grandfather worked those fields every summer. Best corn in 3 counties. Remember the harvest festivals they used to host? Shame what happens when profit matters more than people." That last comment stung. She opened her laptop, pulling up the development proposals. The numbers were impressive. Luxury homes, boutique shops, projected returns that would delight the shareholders. But numbers had always been her father's language. In her heart, she spoke the language of summer nights catching fireflies, of dirt under her fingernails, of possibility sprouting from shallow furrows. Her office phone rang, Rachel Chen calling again, hoping for comment on the article. Catherine had been dodging her calls, protecting her anonymity. But now she found herself reaching for the receiver. Back at the hardware store, Michael gathered his supplies, including the exact paint color the farm had worn in 1962. Ted waved away his money. "Take it on credit. Something tells me you're good for it." "I couldn't. Way I see it, you're doing this whole town a favor, reminding us what we used to be, what we could be again." Michael stepped out into the afternoon sun, Sarah's food in one hand, Ted's trust in the other. Down the street, Rachel Chen hurried past, phone pressed to her ear, excitement clear on her face. "Yes, Ms. Wells. I understand your desire for privacy. But yes, of course, thank you. This will make such a difference." She hung up, spotting Michael. "Oh, just the person I wanted to see. How would you feel about teaching a workshop on historical restoration techniques?" The Historical Society would provide materials, of course. Michael blinked, overwhelmed by the rapid shift in his visibility. A month ago, he'd been invisible, another shadow on the street. Now people were calling him an artisan, an asset to the community. "I'll think about it," he managed. Rachel beamed. "Wonderful, and you'll never believe who just agreed to fund our preservation initiatives. The owner of—" But Michael was already walking away, his mind on the note he'd found that morning. Sometimes the greatest restoration happens in the spaces between people. He hadn't understood it then. standing in the warm afternoon light. Surrounded by the evidence of community awakening, he was beginning to. Dark clouds gathered over the farm as Catherine sat in her temporary office, her father's gold pocket watch heavy in her palm. The antique timepiece had stopped working the day he died, frozen at 3:47. She'd never had it repaired, finding a strange comfort in its stillness. The weather alert on her phone flashed again. Severe storm warning. Through the security feeds, she watched Michael racing against time, securing loose materials and reinforcing vulnerable areas of the farm. "Miss Wells!" Her assistant's voice crackled through the speakerphone. "The board is requesting an emergency meeting. The developers are threatening to pull out if we don't." Thunder cracked overhead, rattling the windows. Catherine's eyes stayed fixed on the screens, watching Michael work with steady determination against the approaching storm. "Not now, Marcus." "But—" "I said not now." She ended the call, slipping the pocket watch into her jacket. Some things mattered more than quarterly reports. At the farm, Michael worked methodically, muscle memory from his military days taking over. Check the roof, secure the perimeter, protect what matters. The wind was picking up, carrying the scent of rain and electricity. He'd found a stack of tarps in the barn that morning, along with fresh rope and emergency supplies. His mysterious benefactor had thought of everything. The knowledge warmed him even as the temperature dropped. The first fat drops of rain began to fall as he finished securing the garden. The heritage tomato plants were finally sprouting, tiny green promises he refused to let wash away. Inside the barn, he discovered old storm logs in Thomas Wells's handwriting, detailed accounts of every major weather event the farm had faced. One entry from 1978 caught his eye. "Remember, protect the north corner first. Everything else flows from there." Lightning split the sky as Michael headed to the north corner. Sure enough, he found subtle signs of water damage that could become critical in a serious storm. He worked quickly, following the guidance of a man long gone, but still present in the farm's bones. In her car, Catherine gripped the steering wheel, watching the storm build. The smart thing would be to stay in town. The safe thing. Instead, she found herself driving toward the farm, her father's watch ticking phantom beats against her heart. The rain was falling in sheets now. Through it, she saw Michael ascending a ladder to secure loose roofing. Her hand tightened on the watch. One slip in this weather, she should call emergency services, should report a trespasser, should do anything except what she was doing, parking her car and stepping out into the storm. Michael was so focused on his task that he didn't hear the car door slam, didn't notice the figure approaching until a voice cut through the wind. "You need help," he startled, nearly losing his grip on the ladder. Below him stood a woman in an expensive suit, already soaked to the skin. Something about her seemed familiar, though he was sure they'd never met. "Get inside," he shouted over the wind. "It's not safe. Neither is being up there alone." Before he could protest further, she was climbing the ladder's lower rungs, stabilizing it against the gusting wind. They worked together in wordless efficiency, securing the roof as thunder rolled overhead. When they finally climbed down, she pulled something from her pocket, an old pocket watch on a gold chain. "My father always said storms show us who we really are," she said, voice barely audible over the rain. He used to stand out in weather like this, making sure the farm was safe. Michael felt the world shift slightly beneath his feet, the elegant handwriting, the careful supplies, the intimate knowledge of the farm's history. "You're Catherine," she said simply, "and I think it's time we talked properly." But before she could say more, a massive crack split the air. They turned in time to see the old oak tree, at the property's edge, starting to fall, directly toward the newly restored garden. Without thinking, they ran together into the storm. Two strangers united by a single purpose, protecting what they'd both come to love. The watch in Catherine's pocket remained still at 3:47, but something else had started moving again, something that had been frozen far longer than any timepiece. The morning after the storm dawned clear and cool, dew glittering on the salvaged tomato plants. Michael and Catherine stood in the kitchen of the farmhouse, dripping coffee from mugs that still bore price tags. Neither had slept much, spending the night moving between repair tasks with the strange intimacy of people united by crisis. Now, in the stark morning light, uncertainty hung between them like morning mist. Michael pulled a rolled bundle of papers from his toolbox, spreading them carefully on the kitchen table. Hand-drawn plans and diagrams covered every page, details meticulously noted in architectural shorthand. "I've been meaning to share these," he said quietly. "Been working on them at the shelter at night." Catherine leaned closer, her corporate polish at odds with the rustic kitchen. The plans showed the farm as it could be, not restored to a sterile past, but renewed with purpose. The old barn reimagined as a community space. The fields sectioned for both historical demonstration, plots, and modern sustainable farming techniques. Every change honored the original spirit while building toward something new. "You see it too," she whispered, fingers tracing the careful lines. "What this place could mean." Michael nodded, not trusting his voice. The plans were more than renovation proposals. They were dreams he'd sketched in stolen moments, never believing they might become real. "During the war," he said finally, "I helped rebuild schools, clinics, watched communities come back to life around them. Places have power. They can heal people if you let them." Catherine's hand stilled on the papers. "Is that what you're looking for? Healing? Aren't we all?" Their eyes met briefly before sliding away. Too much truth, too soon. She turned back to the plans, professional mask slipping back into place. "These are remarkable. The historical society would—" She stopped, remembering he didn't know about her involvement there. Would what? Nothing. She straightened, and suddenly she was every inch the businesswoman again. "I should go. Meetings in the city." But she paused at the door, looking back at the papers spread across the table. "Keep working on these, please." After she left, Michael stood for a long time in the quiet kitchen. The coffee grew cold in his mug as he studied his drawings, seeing them with new eyes. In the margins, he'd sketched smaller details. Children playing in restored gardens, elderly couples on rebuilt benches, a community reclaiming its heart. He'd drawn them late at night in the shelter, surrounded by others who'd lost their way. Dreams seemed safer on paper, where failure couldn't touch them. In her car, Catherine pulled out her phone, scrolling through dozens of missed calls from the board, but instead of returning them, she opened her photos, flipping through the surveillance images she'd collected over the past weeks. Michael fixing the fence, Michael planting the garden, Michael working late into the night, his dedication captured in grainy infrared. She told herself she was just monitoring the property. Now she wondered what she'd really been watching for. She clicked to the last photo, Michael standing in the storm, protecting her father's legacy without even knowing it was hers. The image blurred, and she realized she was crying. Her father's watch sat heavy in her pocket. He'd always taught her that time was money, that sentiment was the enemy of success. But last night, working beside Michael in comfortable silence, time had felt like something else entirely. Something precious and alive, like the heartbeat of the farm itself. She started her car but didn't drive toward the city. Instead, she pulled up to the Historical Society, Rachel Chen's words from the newspaper article echoing in her mind. Some places are worth more than their market value. Inside her briefcase, next to the development proposals, she'd tucked one of Michael's drawings. It showed the farm as it could be, not a relic, not an asset, but a bridge between past and future. Sometimes understanding didn't need words. Sometimes it grew in the spaces between drawings and dreams, between what was lost and what could be found again. "Ms. Wells, the board requires an explanation." Harrison Phillips, head of the development committee, tapped his Mont Blanc pen against the stack of documents before him. "You've been unavailable for weeks. The Morton Valley project is stalling. And now we hear rumors that you're involving yourself with the Historical Society. Catherine sat at the head of the conference table in her Manhattan office, her father's corporate empire stretching out below the floor-to-ceiling windows. The morning sun caught the edge of a folder on her desk. Wells Farm, Asset Evaluation. "I've been personally overseeing the property assessment," she said, keeping her voice neutral. "There are factors to consider beyond immediate development. Potential factors." Harrison's pen stopped tapping. "Catherine, your father built this company on clear-eyed decisions. Sentiment never entered into it." She touched the pocket watch in her jacket, its familiar weight grounding her. "Times change, Harrison. Indeed they do." He slid a tablet across the table, "which is why we took the liberty of running our own investigation." The screen showed surveillance photos, not her careful documentation of Michael's work, but harsh clinical shots. Michael entering the property, Michael using supplies worth thousands of dollars, his shelter registration, his bankruptcy files, the accident report that had cost him everything. "A homeless man squatting on corporate property," Harrison said, "using resources that don't belong to him. This liability cannot continue." Catherine's fingers tightened on the watch. "He's improving the property. He's trespassing. And you're enabling him." Harrison leaned forward. "Catherine, there are rumors, people asking questions about your judgment, about your fitness to lead." The threat hung in the air between them. She thought of Michael's plans spread across her kitchen table that morning. The careful drawings that showed not just buildings, but possibility. "The property is mine," she said quietly. "Personally, not corporate holdings. Everything is connected, Catherine. You know that. Your father is dead." She stood, gathering her papers. "And I'm late for a meeting with the Historical Society." "Catherine, thank you for your concern, Harrison, but I can handle this." She walked out, heels clicking, against marble floors, her reflection fragmenting across glass walls. In her private elevator, she pulled out her phone, scrolling through her own collection of photos. Michael working in the rain. Michael teaching local kids about heritage tomatoes. Michael building something she hadn't even known she was looking for. At the farm, Michael was meeting with Rachel Chen, showing her the restoration plans. Her enthusiasm was infectious as she examined each detailed drawing. "This is exactly what we've been hoping for," Rachel said. "A working model of historical preservation and community renewal. And with Catherine Wells backing us." "What do you mean?" Michael interrupted. Rachel's smile faltered. "Oh, I thought you knew. Ms. Wells has been funding our preservation initiatives. She's the one who's been supplying—" She stopped, reading something in Michael's expression. "The supplies," he said quietly. "The tools, the books. It was all her? Michael?" But he was already gathering his plans, his movements mechanical. All this time he'd thought, what? That some anonymous guardian angel saw worth in him? That he'd found a genuine connection? He walked out into the sunshine that suddenly felt too bright. The farm stretched before him, every repair he'd made now feeling like borrowed time. Of course it belonged to someone. Of course it was just another rich person's game. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. See." He stared at the screen until it went dark. In his pocket, his fingers found the latest note he'd discovered that morning, written in that familiar, elegant script. "Some dreams are too big for one person to carry alone." Inside the farmhouse kitchen, his coffee mug still sat beside hers. From breakfast, both bearing price tags from the local store. Real things, simple things. Or so he'd thought. Catherine's town car pulled up to the farm's gate. She stepped out, Harrison's words echoing in her head. "Your father built this company on clear-eyed decisions." But as she watched Michael standing, in the garden he'd brought back to life, she wondered if her father had ever known the cost of all those clear-eyed decisions, if he'd understood what was lost when everything was measured in dollars and cents. She pulled out the pocket watch, its frozen hands marking a moment that could never be changed. But perhaps other moments, other choices, still could be. The development plans lay between them on the kitchen table like a wound, glossy renderings showing the farm erased, replaced by luxury condos and boutique shops. Evening light slanted through the windows Michael had carefully restored, casting long shadows across Catherine's face. So this was the plan all along. His voice was quiet, dangerous. Let the homeless guy fix it up? Raise the property value before you sell? No. Catherine stepped forward, then stopped as Michael moved back. It's not like that. Really? Because these plans are dated months ago. He tapped the corporate logo on the corner. Wells Development Corporation. Your company. My father's company. Same difference. He turned away, looking out at the garden where heritage tomatoes were finally starting to fruit. I was an investment, another fixer-upper project. You're not listening. I've heard enough. He pulled his plans from his back pocket, the paper worn soft from constant handling. You know what's funny? I actually thought... He laughed, a harsh sound. Doesn't matter what I thought. He dropped the plans on the table. Catherine reached for them, but he was already moving toward the door. Michael, please, let me explain. He paused, hand on the doorframe he'd rebuilt. Explain what? How you watched me through cameras, played your little game, rich people using poor people's labor. It's a classic story. I just never thought I'd be stupid enough to fall for it. That's not fair. Fair. He turned back, and Catherine flinched at the pain in his eyes. I slept in a shelter every night while fixing up your property. Ate at soup kitchens so I could save money for supplies. Supplies you were leaving like some kind of twisted Easter. Egg hunt, was that entertaining for you? Stop it, her voice cracked. You have no idea what these past months have meant. You're right, I don't. He grabbed his toolbox, the one thing that had stayed constant through everything. And I don't want to know. The farm's all yours, Ms. Wells. Do whatever you want with it. The plans are wrong. He stopped at the door. These plans, she continued, picking up the developer's renderings, they're what the board wants, not what I want. And what do you want, Catherine, besides playing games with people's lives? She pulled out her father's pocket watch, holding it like a shield. My father died 3 years ago. Same time you. Lost everything, according to the board's investigation. Michael stiffened. You investigated me. They did, to protect their investment. She spat the last word. That's all anything ever was to my father. All it's supposed to be to me. Assets, returns, clear-eyed decisions. She set the watch on the table, next to Michael's plans for the farm's future. He gave me this watch when I made my first million. Said time was money, and I should never forget it. It stopped the day he died. Is this supposed to make me feel sorry for the poor little rich girl? No. She spread his plans out, hands trembling slightly. It's supposed to help you understand why these matter so much. Why you matter so much. She touched the careful drawings, the community spaces, the teaching gardens, the restored heart of a place that had meant something once. You saw possibility here, not profit. You made something dead come alive again. She looked up at him, including me. Michael's hand tightened on his toolbox. Pretty words, but those development plans say something different. To hell with the development plans. She grabbed them, ripping them in half. To hell with the board, the company, all of it. This place deserves better. We deserve better. We? You know what these months have been for me. Watching you work, reading your notes, seeing something real for the first time in my life. No agendas, no angles, just purpose. She gestured at the farm beyond the windows. You want to know what I want? I want your plans, your vision, your way of seeing what could be instead of just what things are worth. Michael set down his toolbox, the sound loud in the quiet kitchen. And the board? The developers? Let them come. She smiled, a fierce expression that transformed her corporate polish into something wild and real. Some things are worth fighting for. The evening light caught her face, and for a moment Michael saw past the wealthy businesswoman to something else, someone as lost and found as he was, trying to build something true in a world of false values. Okay, he said finally, tell me everything. No more games. Catherine nodded, picking up his plans. No more games, just possibilities. Dawn found them still in the kitchen, empty coffee mugs scattered across the table like remnants of a long siege. Catherine sat cross-legged in a kitchen chair, her suit jacket draped over the back, while Michael pulled a small wooden box from his toolbox. "If we're doing truth," he said, "you should see these." The box opened with a soft creak, revealing a collection of military medals nestled in faded velvet. Bronze Star, Purple Heart, Combat Action Badge, each one telling a story of service and sacrifice. "Combat Engineer," he explained, touching each medal briefly. "3 tours in Afghanistan. We built schools, bridges, medical clinics, taught locals how to maintain them, gave them something to believe in again." Catherine lifted the Bronze Star carefully. "For valor? For staying alive when others didn't?" His voice grew distant. "There was this village. We'd just finished. Their school. Beautiful work. The kids were so excited. Then a suicide bomber." He stopped, shoulders tight. "Sometimes building things isn't enough. Sometimes you can't save what matters most." Understanding dawned in Catherine's eyes. "That's why the farm matters so much to you. Here, I can protect what I build, make something last." He smiled faintly. "At least, I thought I could. You can." Catherine stood, going to her briefcase. "And these prove why." She spread out, documents across the table. Not corporate papers this time, but letters. Dozens of them from local residents, historical society members, even the mayor's office. All praising the farm's transformation, its growing role in the community. "Rachel Chen's been collecting these," Catherine explained. "Evidence of the farm's cultural significance, legal protection against development." Michael picked up one letter, then another. People he'd barely spoken to describing how his work had inspired them, given them hope for their own historic properties. "I had no idea. That's what makes it real." Catherine touched one of his medals. "Like these. You didn't do it for recognition. You did it because it was right." Morning light streamed through the windows, catching the bronze and silver of the medals, making them shine like new. Michael watched Catherine reading the letters, her corporate mask completely gone now. In its place was something raw and real, the person she might have been if wealth hadn't built walls around her heart. "My father," she said suddenly, "used to talk about the farm. Before he got rich, he'd tell stories about growing up here, about what it meant to create something with your hands." She paused. "I think he lost that somewhere along the way, lost himself." "And you?" "I never had it to lose, until now." She met his eyes. "Until you showed me what it could be." Michael gathered his medals, each one a weight he'd carried alone for so long. "After the bombing, I came home different, started my construction company thinking if I built enough beautiful things, I could bury the memories. Then the accident happened. The crane collapse," Catherine said softly. "I read the report. 3 men died, my men. The investigation cleared me, but the lawsuits," he shook his head. "I gave them everything. The company, my savings, my home, felt right somehow. Blood money for blood guilt, but it wasn't your fault. Responsibility isn't always about fault." He touched the Bronze Star. "Sometimes it's about carrying the weight anyway." Catherine stood, walking to the window. The garden stretched out below, morning dew making everything shine like new creation. "Then share the weight," she said. "These past months, watching you work, I've been carrying my father's legacy alone, trying to be what he wanted. Maybe we've both been carrying too much by ourselves." She turned back to him. "Your plans for the farm, they're not just about buildings. They're about healing, community, purpose, everything my father's company forgot about in the rush for profit. And everything I forgot about after the accident," Michael added quietly. They sat in silence for a moment, medals and letters mingling on the table between them. Each piece of metal, each written word, telling stories of loss and hope, destruction and creation. "So," Catherine said finally, "partners?" Michael picked up the Bronze Star, then handed it to her. "Hold this for me." She took it, understanding the trust being offered. "I'll keep it safe." "I know," He smiled, real this time. Now, about those development vultures circling your board meetings. Catherine's answering smile was fierce. Let me show you what Elsa Rachel's been working on. Sometimes the best defense is a good historical preservation ordinance. The morning sun climbed higher, warming the meadows that lay between them, like bridges across the gaps that had once seemed uncrossable. The garden gate swung open smoothly on its newly restored hinges, no trace remaining of the rust that had once frozen it shut. Catherine watched Michael make one final adjustment to the wrought iron latticework, his hands moving with the certainty of someone who understood that small details made the difference between good and extraordinary. "Perfect timing," he said, stepping back to admire their work. "The Historical Society tour is tomorrow. Our first official public event." Catherine ran her hand along the intricate metalwork, marveling at how Michael had rescued the original patterns from decades of neglect. "Are you ready to show off our progress?" he smiled. "Or to be seen standing next to Catherine Wells, corporate heir and secret farm restorer? Both, I suppose." She hesitated. "The press will be there. Questions will be asked. About the odd couple saving a worthless old farm." His tone was light, but his eyes were serious. "Let them ask." They walked through the gate together, entering the garden they'd brought back to life. Heritage tomatoes climbed restored trellises, their fruit ripening in the late summer sun. Herbs filled the air with fragrance: rosemary, thyme, basil, each plant grown from seeds found in the old shed. "I've been thinking," Catherine said, stopping beside a flourishing tomato plant, "about how to structure our partnership legally, to protect both of us." Michael tensed slightly. "Catherine, no, listen, I want to transfer partial ownership of the farm to you. Make it official." He turned to face her, surprise and something else flickering across his features. "You can't do that." "Actually, I can. The property's in my name personally, not the corporation's. I've had my lawyers draw up the papers." She pulled an envelope from her bag. 49%. Fair compensation for sweat equity. Michael stared at the envelope but didn't take it. "Why?" "Because you love this place as much as I do. Because you saw its value when everyone else saw decay." She stepped closer. "Because I trust you." The words hung between them, weighted with everything they'd shared over the past months. The notes, the small gifts, the gradual building of something neither had expected to find. "The board will fight it," he warned. "Let them." She smiled, her father's daughter in her steel but her own woman in her heart. "I've learned a few things about fighting for what matters." Michael took the envelope finally, his calloused fingers brushing hers. "Partners then, for real." "For real." They continued walking through the garden, planning tomorrow's tour. The late afternoon light caught the restored gate behind them, its shadow falling across the path like a door opening. "To a new future. Rachel wants us to talk about our vision," Catherine said. "How we plan to make the farm self-sustaining. Teaching programs." Michael nodded. "Historical restoration workshops, community garden plots, getting the next generation invested in preservation and the development plans. Dead and buried," he grinned, "or should I say, composted into something useful." Catherine laughed, the sound as free and natural as the butterflies dancing around the herb garden. 3 months ago, she wouldn't have understood the joke. 3 months ago, she wouldn't have laughed at all. They reached the old oak tree that had nearly fallen in the storm, now properly braced and healing. Michael touched its trunk, checking the supports. "You know what tomorrow means?" he asked. "No more hiding, no more secret notes or mysterious supplies appearing like magic. Having second thoughts?" He turned to her, his expression open and unguarded. "About the farm? Never. About being thrust into your world of press conferences and corporate politics." He shrugged. "That's new territory." "Trust me," Catherine said. "Your world of honest work and real value. That's newer territory for me." She touched the gate's ironwork again. "But I think we're both ready for new territories." The sun was setting now, painting the garden in shades of gold and promise. Tomorrow would bring challenges, Reporters' questions, board members' disapproval, the constant pressure to justify choosing preservation over profit. But tonight, in the garden they'd restored together, those challenges felt like opportunities rather than threats. "Ready for tomorrow, partner?" Catherine asked. Michael looked at her, at the garden, at the life they'd brought back to this forgotten corner of the world. "Ready for everything," he said. And in the growing dusk, the restored gate stood as testament to their words, a threshold between past and future, between broken and whole, between alone and together. The property deed lay on Catherine's desk, like a landmine waiting to detonate. Harrison Phillips had delivered it personally that morning, his smile sharp as a paper cut. "Found this during our review," he'd said. "Interesting clause, your father added before his death. Might want to read it carefully before you give away half the farm." Now, alone in her office, Catherine stared at the highlighted text until the words burned into her vision. Property transfer, prohibited without unanimous board approval. Her father's final chess move, reaching from beyond the grave to maintain control. She'd thought the farm was hers personally, but he'd tied it to the corporation with invisible strings, the kind that could strangle dreams. Her phone buzzed. Michael sending pictures of the Historical Society tour preparations. The latest showed local schoolchildren planting legacy apple trees, their faces bright with purpose. The caption read, "Future Farmers of America. Who knew preservation could be contagious?" Catherine's throat tightened. She hadn't told him about the deed yet. Hadn't found the words to explain how her father's ghost still haunted every decision, every attempt at independence. The intercom crackled. "Ms. Wells, the board is requesting an emergency meeting regarding the Morton Valley property." "When?" "They're waiting now." Catherine gathered the deed and her father's pocket watch, armor and albatross both. In the elevator mirror, she practiced her corporate mask, the one she'd been wearing less and less at the farm. The boardroom fell silent as she entered. Harrison stood at the head of the table, development plans spread before him like battle plans. "Catherine," he smiled, "we were just discussing your innovative approach to property management. You mean saving a historical landmark?" "I mean giving away corporate assets to homeless handymen." The words hit like slaps. Catherine kept her face neutral, though her hands wanted to shake. "Michael Hayes is a skilled contractor and veteran who bankrupted his own company." Harrison cut in. "Who lost everything through negligence. Is this really the kind of partner Wells Development needs?" "The farm isn't part of Wells Development. The deed suggests otherwise." Harrison tapped the damning clause. "Your father knew what he was doing, Catherine. Knew you'd need guidance." The watch seemed to grow heavier in her pocket. She thought of Michael at the farm, teaching children about heritage agriculture, showing them how to plant roots, both literal and metaphorical. "The farm has more value than you understand." "Oh, we understand its value." Harrison clicked a remote, and the wall screen lit up with promotional renders. Luxury eco-homes, farm-to-table restaurants, all the authenticity the market demands, packaged for maximum profit. "We're not destroying the farm, Catherine, we're evolving it." The images showed the farm's bones wrapped in steel and glass, a theme park version of agricultural history. Everything her father would have loved. Everything she and Michael were fighting against. "No, I beg your pardon?" Catherine stood, her chair rolling back. "I said no, the farm stays as it is. That's not your decision to make." Harrison's smile vanished. "Not alone, anyway. The board votes tomorrow. I suggest you reconsider your position before then." "Or what? Or we'll be forced to reevaluate your role in the company. Your father built an empire, Catherine. Are you really willing to risk it all for some romantic notion of preservation? For a man you barely know?" She touched the watch, feeling its frozen hands through her pocket. Time was money, her father always said, but he'd been wrong about so many things. "You know what I remember about my father, Harrison? Not the empire he built, not the millions he made. I remember him teaching me to plant tomatoes, to test soil with my hands, to value things that grew slowly, with care and patience. She pulled out her phone, showing them Michael's photo of the children planting trees. This is real value, real growth. If you can't see that, maybe it's your vision that needs re-evaluation. Catherine, the board can vote however it wants, but understand this, I will fight you. With every legal tool, every preservation law, every historical protection statute available. The farm isn't just property, it's purpose. And I won't let you destroy that. She walked out, leaving silence in her wake. In the elevator, her phone buzzed again. Another picture from Michael, this one of a newly discovered cache of antique farming tools in the barn. More history waiting to be restored, his message read. Ready when you are, partner. Catherine looked at the deed in her hand, her father's legal trap now clear as day. She'd have to tell Michael everything, risk losing everything, but watching those children plant trees for a future they believed in, some risks were worth taking. She typed back, "We need to talk. Some complications with the partnership paperwork." His reply came quickly. "Complications are just opportunities wearing work boots. See you at the farm." Catherine smiled, despite everything. Time to plant some new seeds and damn the consequences. The corporate ultimatum arrived by courier just as Michael was finishing the morning harvest. He watched Catherine read it, her face growing paler with each line. They sat together on the restored porch steps, the letter between them like a live wire. "They're not subtle, are they?" Michael said, scanning the document's cold corporate language. The terms were clear. Catherine could keep her position as CEO if she signed over the farm. If not, the board would trigger their nuclear option, a clause that could strip her of both her leadership role and her inheritance. 48 hours to decide. Catherine's voice was hollow. Sign or lose everything. Around them the farm hummed with life. Children's voices drifted from the teaching garden where local schools now held agriculture classes. The community workshop in the restored barn was preparing for another historical preservation seminar. Everything they'd built together over the past months, balanced now on the edge of a knife. "You can't give up the company," Michael said quietly. "Your father's legacy is right here." Catherine gestured to the farm. "This is his real legacy, not the corporate empire, not the billions. This place where he learned what it meant to create something meaningful." Catherine, "No, listen." She pulled out her father's pocket watch, its hand still frozen at 3:47. "I've been carrying his time all these years, trying to be what he became instead of remembering what made him worth becoming in the first place." Michael touched the watch gently. And what was that? Someone who understood that real wealth grows from the ground up. Someone who knew that community matters more than profit. She looked at him. "Someone like you." The morning sun caught the dew on the harvest baskets, making the vegetables shine like jewels. Michael remembered his first days here, when hope was as scarce as the dollars in his pocket. "I never told you," he said, "but after the accident, after I lost everything, I thought about ending it. Just walking into traffic one day, letting it all stop." Catherine's hand found his, warm and solid. "Then I found this place. Started fixing things, started feeling useful again." He squeezed her hand. "You gave me that, Catherine, even before I knew who you were. We gave each other something," she corrected. "A chance to remember who we really are." The ultimatum sat between them, its deadline ticking like a bomb. In the distance, a school bus arrived, bringing more children for their weekly farming lesson. Life continuing, growing, refusing to be corporate strategized into submission. "There might be a way," Catherine said slowly, "but it's risky, and I'll need your help." "Name it." She pulled out another document, old, yellowed, but official looking. "Found this in my father's personal files." Turns out he did more than add that transfer clause to the deed. Michael read quickly, his eyes widening. "Catherine, this is—" "I know." She stood, newfound energy in her movements. "The board thinks they're playing chess. Time to show them we're playing a different game entirely. It could backfire. You could lose everything." "No." She looked around at the farm, at the children learning where food comes from, at the community coming together, at the man who had helped her rebuild more than just buildings. Everything that matters is right here. The rest is just numbers. On paper, Michael stood too, understanding in his eyes. Partners? Partners. She checked her phone. The board meets in 2 hours. Ready to crash a corporate party? He grinned, the expression of a man who had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. Born ready. But first, he walked to the harvest baskets, selecting the most perfect tomato, red and ripe, grown from those heritage seeds they'd planted together. For luck, he said, handing it to her, and to remind them what real value tastes like. Catherine took the tomato, its weight solid and real in her hand, like Michael's strength beside her, like the ground beneath their feet, like truth itself. "Let's go change the world," she said, "one farm at a time." The ultimatum lay forgotten on the porch steps as they walked to her car, leaving behind the morning dew and taking with them something stronger than corporate threats, the certainty that some choices made themselves, if you were brave enough to listen. The Wells Development boardroom fell silent as Michael laid his military discharge papers on the polished table. Honorable discharge, combat medals, commendations for leadership under fire, the physical proof of a life dedicated to building rather than destroying. Interesting reading material, Harrison Phillips sneered from the head of the table, but hardly relevant to this meeting. Actually, Catherine said, standing beside Michael, it's completely relevant. These papers prove that Michael Hayes has exactly the qualifications my father required for his succession plan. She pulled out the yellow document they'd discovered, her father's final amendment to the company charter. "Would you like to read it, Harrison? Or should I?" Without waiting for an answer, she began. "In addition to my daughter Catherine, future leadership of Wells Development shall require a partner with proven experience in both construction and community building. Someone who understands that true development means growing something larger than profit." The board members shifted uncomfortably as she continued. "Furthermore, this partner must demonstrate through action rather than words their commitment to these principles. Upon finding such a partner, Catherine shall have full authority to restructure company holdings as she sees fit." Harrison's face had gone from red to purple. "This is absurd. You can't possibly suggest that some homeless handyman—" "Combat engineer," Michael corrected quietly. "Small business owner. And yes, homeless for a time. I've built things and lost things. Know the value of both." He spread out photographs of the farm's transformation. "But more importantly, I understand what your development plans don't, that real growth happens through community, not consumption." Catherine laid her father's pocket watch beside the photos. "The farm was a test, wasn't it, Dad?" she said softly. "Not just of me, but of whoever might help me lead." One of the older board members, Eleanor Chen, picked up Michael's discharge. "Papers. 3 bronze stars, combat engineering unit, specialized in community infrastructure under hostile conditions." She looked up sharply. "Rather like corporate development, wouldn't you say?" A ripple of uncomfortable laughter ran through the room. Harrison slammed his hand on the table. "This is manipulation. The clause clearly intends, Catherine cut in, "to ensure that Wells Development remembers its roots. And those roots go deeper than you know." She nodded to Michael, who pulled out one final document, the original deed to the farm, dated 1920. "This farm," Catherine said, "was purchased by my great-grandfather with everything he had. A Chinese immigrant who barely spoke English, betting his whole life on American soil. He built it into something that fed a community. That taught his son, my grandfather, the value of growing things that last." She faced the board directly. "My father lost sight of that for a while, chased profits instead of purpose, but in the end, he tried to fix his mistake. This clause isn't just about leadership, it's about redemption." "Pretty speeches," Harrison spat. "But the numbers? Show that our new direction is working. Eleanor Chen held up her tablet. The farm's educational programs are generating positive PR worth millions. Our reputation for historical preservation is opening doors to sensitive development projects worldwide. And that's just the beginning. She smiled at Catherine. Your father and I used to talk about his regrets, about how he hoped you'd find a different way, a better balance. This is ridiculous, Harrison started, but other board members were nodding. The Historical Society's preservation model could be adapted for urban development, one said. Community-integrated design is the future, added another, and Hayes's military engineering experience in sustainable infrastructure, a third chimed in. Harrison looked around the table, seeing his support crumbling. You can't seriously consider it's not your decision anymore. Catherine's voice was steel wrapped in silk. The charter is clear. I've found my partner. Someone who proves that true value isn't about what you own, but what you build. She picked up her father's watch, then deliberately set it running again with a small key she'd had made. The tick, tick, tick filled the sudden silence. Wells Development is returning to its roots, she said. Not just preserving history, but growing from it. You can either help us build that future or step aside for those who will. The boardroom erupted in discussion, but Catherine and Michael were already walking out, their fingers intertwined. Think it worked? He asked quietly. Catherine smiled, feeling the watch ticking in her pocket like a second heartbeat. Dad always said timing was everything. I think we just proved him right. Evening settled over the farm, like a soft blanket as Catherine and Michael sat on the porch steps, an old photo album open between them. The victory at the board meeting felt distant now, replaced by something more intimate. The sharing of histories, too personal for corporate battlefields. This was Dad's first harvest, Catherine said, touching a faded photograph. A young Thomas Wells stood proudly beside rows of corn, his father, Catherine's grandfather, beaming beside him. Before money changed everything. Michael studied the image. The same fields he'd helped restore stretched out behind the figures. In the photo, a testament to cycles of growth and decay, loss and renewal. He looks happy, Michael observed, like a man who knew exactly who he was. He lost that somewhere along the way. Catherine turned the page, revealing more snapshots of the farm's golden age. Started measuring his worth in dollars instead of sunsets. She pulled out a newer photo from her wallet. Herself as a child, sitting on her father's shoulders among the tomato vines. Both of them laughing, soil staining their hands. The last summer before he sold the equipment, she explained, before we moved to the city. Michael reached into his toolbox, bringing out his own worn envelope of photographs. The first showed a younger version of himself in combat fatigues, standing with his engineering unit in front of a newly built school in Afghanistan. Sometimes I dream about that school, he said quietly. Wonder if it's still standing, if it made any difference. It made a difference to someone. Catherine touched the proud faces of the children in the background. Just like this farm, they continued sharing photos and stories as stars began appearing overhead. Michael's construction company in its early days. Catherine's graduation from business school. Moments when their paths could have crossed but didn't. Years spent building separate lives that would eventually intertwine. Look at this one, Michael said, pulling out a newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Local Builder Makes Good." The photo showed him accepting a community service award for a homeless shelter his company had renovated. 2 weeks before the E.T. accident, he added, "Funny how fast things can change." Catherine leaned against him, their shoulders touching. Or how fast they can change back. She showed him one final photo, taken just yesterday by Rachel Chen. In it, they stood together, in the teaching garden, surrounded by children planting fall crops. Their faces glowed with something beyond happiness, purpose maybe, or peace. We're not so different, Catherine mused. Both trapped by expectations, both looking for something real, and both finding it in the last place we expected, Michael. smiled. "Think your father knew when he wrote that clause?" "I think," Catherine considered carefully, "I think he knew what he'd lost. Knew I'd need help finding it again." The night air carried the scent of ripening apples from the orchard. They'd restored. Somewhere in the darkness, crickets played their eternal symphony. "You know," Michael said, "when I first started fixing this place, I thought I was just killing time, trying to feel useful again. And now? Now I understand what your father wrote about growing something larger than profit." He gestured at the album between them. "All these photos, they're not just memories. They're proof that what we build matters less than why we build it." Catherine gathered the photos, each one a piece of the puzzle that had brought them here. Her father's watch ticked softly in her pocket, keeping time with the rhythm of their shared breaths. "Partners in all things?" she asked softly. Michael took her hand, his calluses rough against her palm. "In all things." Above them, a shooting star traced a bright path across the darkening sky. Neither made a wish. They didn't need to anymore. The new farm sign gleamed in the morning sun, hand-carved letters filled with gold leaf. "Wells Hayes Heritage Farm and Community Center, Est 1920, renewed 2025. Below, smaller text read, "Growing tomorrow from yesterday's roots." Michael adjusted. The signs angled slightly as Catherine directed from below. The whole town seemed to have turned out for the official reopening ceremony, the farm's parking area filled with cars, and the grounds bustling with activity. "Perfect," Catherine called up. "Just like everything else today." Rachel Chen hurried, over, clipboard in hand. "The mayor's ready whenever you are, and the school board representatives want to discuss expanding the educational program. Tell them we'll meet tomorrow," Catherine said. "Today is for celebrating." Michael climbed down from the ladder, pausing to admire their handiwork. The sign represented more than just a name change. It was a declaration of victory, of transformation, of two broken paths merging into something stronger. Harrison Phillips had resigned last week, along with his most ardent supporters. The board, led by Eleanor Chen, had unanimously approved the farm's new status as a protected historical site and community education center. Wells Development's future would be built on preservation and sustainable growth, not destruction disguised as progress. The garden that had started with a few heritage tomato plants now supplied fresh produce to local schools and shelters. The restored barn hosted workshops on everything from traditional carpentry to sustainable farming. Every weekend, families gathered to learn, grow, and remember what community meant. Mr. Hayes, a group of children ran up wearing junior farmer badges, part of the new education program. "Can you teach us about the old tools today, please?" Michael grinned at Catherine. "Duty calls, partner." She watched him lead the children toward the barn, their excited voices carrying across the morning air. Who would have thought 6 months ago that a homeless veteran and a corporate heiress would end up here? That broken dreams could grow into something so alive. Ted Morton approached, carrying a package wrapped in brown paper. "Found these in the store's basement. Thought you might want them for the historical display." Inside were the original receipts from Catherine's grandfather's first seed orders, along with photographs of the store's early days supplying local farms. "Ted, these are incredible," Catherine breathed. "Thank you." "Thank you," he replied, "for remembering what this town almost forgot." The mayor was setting up near the new sign, preparing for the ceremony. Local reporters gathered, cameras ready. But Catherine's attention was drawn to a group of people standing slightly apart from the crowd, residents of the shelter where Michael had stayed during those first months of restoration. She walked over to them. "Welcome to the farm, Michael." "Invited us," one man said hesitantly. "Said something about a job training program? Agricultural and restoration apprenticeships," Catherine nodded. "Paid positions, with housing included. Michael speaks very highly of your potential." Hope flickered in their eyes. The same hope she'd first seen in Michael when he discovered purpose among these fields. Some crops, she'd learned, grew best in broken ground. The ceremony began, but the real celebration was in the small moments. happening everywhere. Children teaching their parents about heritage vegetables, elderly residents sharing stories of the farm's early days, former corporate executives discussing sustainable development with local farmers. Michael rejoined her as the mayor finished speaking, ready for the big announcement. Catherine squeezed his hand. Ready. They stepped up to the podium together. The crowd quieted, cameras flashed, but Catherine saw only the faces that mattered, the community that had become family, the people who understood that some things were worth more than money. Today, she began, we're announcing the creation of the Wells Hayes Foundation for Community Preservation. Every year, we'll select another historical property at risk of development and work with local communities to restore and repurpose it, because what we've built here isn't just about saving one farm. It's about remembering who we are and growing into who we can be. Michael took over. The foundation's first project will be the old Miller dairy farm outside town. Like this place, it has good bones. Like this place, it just needs people who see its value. Applause erupted, but they weren't finished. Catherine held up her hand. We're also establishing a permanent trust to fund agricultural education and historical preservation training for veterans and homeless individuals, because everyone deserves a chance to grow new roots. The celebration lasted well into the evening. As sunset painted the sky in shades of promise, Catherine and Michael stood by their new sign, watching children play tag between rows of autumn corn. "Think your father would approve?" Michael asked softly. Catherine touched the watch in her pocket, still keeping perfect time. "I think he finally got exactly what he wanted, someone who could help me build something real." "We did more than a build," Michael said, looking out over their flourishing fields. "We grew something." Above them, the new sign caught the last rays of sun, gold letters glowing like seeds of light planted in darkness, promising an endless harvest of possibility. 1 year later, the wedding rings caught the morning light as Michael and Catherine stood in their garden, his father's old hammer transformed into bands of steel that told their story in worn grooves and honest metal. It had been his surprise, taking the tool that had started everything and turning it into symbols of their shared future. "Perfect metaphor," Catherine had said when he proposed, "building something new from something old." Now they watched the autumn sunrise paint their world in shades of possibility. The farm hummed with early morning activity, veterans from their training program tending the heritage orchards, student groups arriving for agriculture classes, Rachel Chen leading a historical architecture tour through the restored buildings. "Hard to believe it's only been a year," Michael said, his hand finding Catherine's. Their rings clinked softly together. The Wells Hayes Foundation had already restored 3 more properties, each one becoming a center for community renewal. The corporate board, under Eleanor Chen's guidance, had fully embraced their vision of sustainable development. Even Harrison Phillips had grudgingly admitted their success in a recent Business Journal article. But the real victory was in the small moments. Homeless individuals finding purpose in the restoration programs, children learning where food really came from, elderly residents sharing stories of the town's history with a new generation. Catherine touched her father's watch, now keeping perfect time in her pocket. "You know what Dad would say about all this? Time is money?" "No," she smiled. "He'd say we're rich beyond counting." The morning light caught their rings as they walked through the teaching garden. Each bed burst with fall vegetables, squash and pumpkins, late tomatoes and hardy greens. The original heritage tomato plants had produced seeds for 100 new gardens across the county. At the garden gate, the one where their story truly began, they paused. Michael adjusted the sign he'd carved for their wedding day. "Every dream needs good soil to grow." "Speaking of dreams," Catherine said, "the architect's plans came for the new veterans' housing complex. The one by the Miller farm?" She nodded. "Eleanor thinks we can break ground by spring. 20 units, all, with garden access and workshop space. From one restored farm to a whole community." Michael touched his ring. Not bad for a homeless handyman and a corporate heiress. Hey, Catherine turned to face him. You were never just a handyman, and I was never just an heiress. We were both looking for the same thing, a purpose bigger than ourselves, a home worth building. They walked on, past the barn where their first real conversation had happened during the storm, past the porch where they'd shared their histories through photographs, past all the places where broken pieces had slowly mended into something stronger. The morning's first tour group gathered by the new sign, Rachel's voice carrying clearly, "This farm isn't just about preserving the past. It's about growing the future, one restored dream at a time." Catherine squeezed Michael's hand. "Ready for another day of growing dreams, partner." He brought their joined hands up, morning light dancing across the rings that had once been a hammer, the tool that had started his healing, that had helped him build a new life from the ruins of the old. "With you, always." Above them, an apple tree they'd planted together that first summer stretched toward the sky, its branches heavy with fruit, its roots deep in soil that had never forgotten its purpose. Like them, it had grown strong not despite its challenges but because of them. The rings caught the light one final time as they walked toward their day, their future, their shared harvest of hope.